Welcome to this video lecture, Understanding Project Management, a Practical Guide, Chapter 4, Scope Planning. So here we are in the project lifecycle yet again, and we are moving on to our next topic, which is scope planning. In this part of in this lecture during scope planning, we are talking about what the project will do, what it will create. So the two questions are, what do the project stakeholders need? And what will the project produce? Now, in terms of what do the project stakeholders need, in order to define the scope, the needs or requirements of the project stakeholders are determined. That's what the project is being done on behalf of, not what the project team wants, not what the project manager wants. It's what the identified project stakeholders, what their needs or requirements are. There are a number of methods that may be used to gather requirements in the form of interviews, that is meetings, either individually with stakeholders, they can be group meetings, and so on, whatever is practical. If there are larger numbers of stakeholders, so interviews with stakeholders is generally done when there are, a finite number of stakeholders and that's feasible. When there are many stakeholders, for example, if we were trying to derive or getting our requirements from a large number of, say, customers or users of a product, perhaps a survey would be a better choice, or a way to determine what the requirements are. Focus groups can be used as well. Those are situations where a number of representative stakeholders are selected, and then a meeting is held with those selected people, and that's called a focus group. So questions are asked of that subgroup, and that represents then the whole of the larger group. And then finally, research may be used as well, in terms of determining consumer tastes, trends in demographics and usage, or research into what past projects have done in this area. So these are the methods that requirements may be gathered. Let's watch the video on what our project team is starting to do in the area of gathering requirements.
Sophie sits at her desk and considers the recent project kickoff meeting. While there were a few tough questions from the head of the software development division, it all went well. Picking up the project charter document, she scans the objectives for the project. She turns off her phone's ringer to prevent any interruptions. Sophie refreshes her memory by looking at the objectives. Based on the business case for the project, a full product launch is required, including the support of the sales process, an update of DecoCam's website information, social media promotion, trade show materials, and the development of a promotional video. While this is a good start, Sophie knows that these are high-level objectives. That is, the requirements for each of these objectives need additional detail in order for the scope of the project to be defined. The project has been approved with a $60,000 budget, so Sophie knows that the requirements need to fit within this budget. In order to determine the project requirements, Sophie will need to bring a new member into her project team, a business analyst. After negotiating with a couple of senior managers within the company, Sophie secures Fatijit Kumar for a period of time. Fatijit was one of the company's first employees and has worked in both the administrative and marketing areas of the company. He has recently moved into a business analyst position, and his in-depth knowledge of the company has been very useful during recent projects. Fatijit meets with a number of individuals within the product development and marketing departments in order to understand their needs. He also reviews the approaches that were taken when similar products were launched, while also checking to see the impact the approaches had on the subsequent sales activity. Fatijit documents this information in the project requirements document.
Okay, in terms of what we saw there, the PM, Sophie, we saw her reviewing the project charter and business case. And that's an ongoing reminder that the project itself, the scope of the project, should be based on the direction provided by these two documents. Now, at this point, the project team may start to grow. So we saw that in order to help define the project requirements, a new team member, a business analyst, Fattyjet, joins the project. Fattyjet primarily, as you saw in the video, uses interviews with key stakeholders to gather requirements. You saw a meeting there of Fattyjet and a number of the project stakeholders, although he also researches past product launch projects. You can see the project requirements document for the case study in the textbook in chapter 4. And key idea, gather the project requirements from the project stakeholders. Now, what will the project produce? Once the project requirements have been defined, the next step is to define the work that needs to be completed. Now, a note should be made at this point is that the work that is created, the scope of the project does not always completely equal the requirements. Sometimes the requirements are greater than what is possible because remember, the requirements is a list of what the stakeholders would want or need. It's not constrained by anything. There's no budget on that. There's no timeline. Once we start talking about the scope, we need to consider the timeline, the budget, our resource constraints, and so on. So all of that goes into defining the scope. So there can be a difference. In some cases, we can do everything that is required. In some cases, it may be different or less. So that's something to keep in mind. So the definition of the work consists of two main processes and resulting documents. One is the creation of the project scope statement, and the other is the creation of the work breakdown structure. So we'll look at those two. First, we'll watch a video where we'll see the project scope statement being produced.
As Sophie reflects on her planning up to this point, she is feeling more confident since she has a good handle on both the needs of the project stakeholders and the project requirements. Yet the more she thinks about the next steps, the more uneasy she feels. Sophie's natural tendency is to want to get going on the project rather than writing down the details. However, during some of her recent projects, this approach has caused problems later on. One or more of the following would usually take place. Even though details were discussed with the project sponsor and other stakeholders, memories of the discussion and decisions would fade over time. There were often disagreements about what was or was not to be included in the project. Team members working on the project were often confused about what they were meant to produce. Small details were missed, causing a number of last-minute emergencies. Verifying the quality of the completed deliverables was difficult, as the team members were not sure what they should be looking for. So for this project, Sophie decides to create a detailed project scope statement. Together with Fattyjet, she frequently refers to the project requirements document as they begin to define the various deliverables that will be created during the project. They frequently need to communicate with many of the stakeholders in order to determine the characteristics of each deliverable. They are also constantly aware of their overall budget and project due date. In addition, there are a number of possible deliverables that are defined as not being in the scope of their project. For example, while the project requirements document included a requirement to update DecoCam printed material, it was decided that it would be more effective for the corporate promotions department to perform this task. To ensure this decision is documented, Fattyjet adds this decision to the project exclusion section of the project scope statement.
Okay, so in this video, we saw a number of things happening. When defining the project scope, it is important to determine the deliverables that will be produced. So one of the key concepts of scope is the concept of deliverables. Deliverables are based on requirements, that were gathered. So sometimes not all requirements may be addressed due to project constraints. We talked about those. Deliverables are like pieces of the project, chunks of work, and they are documented in the project scope statement. So in the project scope statement, we'll see all of the different aspects of the project, all of the different things that will be produced, as well as a detailed description of what the characteristics of each deliverable is. For an example of a project scope statement, you can check the textbook chapter 4 for the example of the project scope statement. So key idea, create a project scope statement that describes the project deliverables to be included and not included in the scope of the project. Ensure this document is signed off by the appropriate stakeholders. Now, there's often other supporting documents that do not fit easily into the structure of a project scope statement, which is generally a scope statement would be produced in a tool like Microsoft Word. But there's also other documents that are sometimes in other formats. They may be hard copy, they may be in other software, they might be architectural drawings or CAD, CAM type engineering documents, and so on, and they would not necessarily fit into a project scope statement. In that case, the project scope statement refers to these documents, references them, and you can view the project scope statement as the index of where all the scope is. Even if it's not contained within the pages of the scope statement, it may refer to other documents. And that's answering the question of what other types of documents would potentially not fit. So key idea, supporting documents that describe the scope of the project may be appended to the project scope statement, or the scope statement may reference them in order to more fully describe the project scope. This brings us to the concept of the work breakdown structure. So, as the project scope statement is being developed and the deliverables are being identified, the WBS is created, which organizes the deliverables into a hierarchy as shown here. So we can see at the top of the hierarchy is the project, and then each of the deliverables, each of the pieces of the project, which are described in the scope statement, are organized. So this project consists of three deliverables: the pink, the green, and the teal, 1, 2, and 3. And then each of those deliverables may be broken down into smaller deliverables, that will be easier to deliver and describe. So deliverable 1 can be broken down into 1.1 and 1.2. Deliverable 2 can be broken down into 2.1, 2, and 3, and 3 into 3.1 and 3.2. This process of taking large deliverables, chunks of the project, and breaking them into smaller pieces is the basis of planning, so that at the end, we end up with a number of smaller chunks of work that are easier to manage and be able to work with. Now, the smallest uh, deliverables at the bottom of a work breakdown structure are referred to as work packages. So that's something to keep in mind, is that um, they are also they're referred to as deliverables, but also as work packages. Now, the top of the work breakdown structure will have levels. So the top level is level 1, the project. The next level is the high level deliverables. That's level 2. And then the next level is the breakdown of the high level deliverables into sub deliverables or work packages. Now, some work breakdown structures can go down another level of breakdown, but we're going to stop at level 3. A work breakdown structure can also be shown in list format. This is the exact same work breakdown structure, but just done in list format. This is easier to maintain. This can be done using Microsoft Word, for example, and it's much easier to maintain. It again has the multiple levels. There's level 1, level 2, and level 3. So it's the exact same work breakdown structure, just in a different format. Okay, so let's now see our project manager starting to develop the work breakdown structure.
With the project scope statement underway, the planning team, Sophie and Fatijit, turn their attention to organizing the project. A number of deliverables have already been defined, but the question now becomes how to organize the project. Scanning the list of deliverables, they decide that the project itself may be organized into three main deliverables. 1. Trade show support. 2. Communications. 3. Promotional video. Each of the deliverables from the project scope statement is inserted under one of three deliverables above. Because of the size and complexity of the promotional video deliverable, Sophie and Fatijit decide to break it down into two smaller deliverables as follows. Video plan and video production. As they put the finishing touch on the WBS, Sophie feels a sense of relief. The product launch is large and complex, and she wasn't quite sure where to start. But having organized the project into a hierarchy of deliverables, she can now focus on the completion of 9 manageable work packages.
Okay, so in that video, we saw the work that was underway. And based on the work underway in the project scope statement, Sophie and Fatijit decide that there are three main categories of work. So in this instance, the approach they're taking is somewhat of a top-down approach to creating the WBS, which is they viewed the different deliverables and decided that the level 2 would be trade show, communications, and promotional video. Those are the main three categories of work. And then each of these main categories were broken down into smaller chunks of work. So some of the deliverables from the scope statement were slotted under each of those level 2 and became the level 3 work packages. And in one case, the promotional video deliverable was broken down into two smaller deliverables in the work breakdown structure. Here is the WBS from the case study. So we can see this is the work that is to be done, trade show support, and you can see each of the sub-deliverables are work packages, communications, and promotional video. So again, each item within the WBS, these chunks of works are called deliverables. A deliverable is something that is produced during the project. Trade show support, communication, and promotional videos are deliverables. And again, they may be broken down into smaller deliverables. The communications deliverable consists of a press release, media outreach, social media, and website updates. And when a deliverable is not broken down any further, it is also called a work package. So in this case, we have a number of work packages, the 3 in trade show support, the 4 in communications, and the 2 in promotional video. So that's 3 plus 4, that's 7, plus 2 is 9. So there are 9 work packages, and that represents the scope of the project. Now, there are various approaches that may be used to create a WBS. There's no one way. And from the textbook, if you reference the textbook, you'll see there's a top-down approach. That was what was basically demonstrated in the video. You can also do it from the bottom up. You can identify all of the small pieces, the work packages first, and then assemble that into a work breakdown structure and decide what the category headings or the level 2 deliverables will be. So you can start from the bottom up. You can use a similar project's WBS as a starting point. If an organization does a similar type of project over and over, the previous project's WBS can be used as a starting point and then modified. And sometimes organizations will have a standard WBS for all of their projects. In the video, we did see it was more resembling a top down. Now the question becomes, well, how do you know when do you stop breaking a deliverable down? Do you stop at level 3, level 4? How do you know when to when to stop. And the answer is once the team, the person or the team working on the deliverable, once they know what it is and can identify it and understand the work to be done, that's the time to stop. And that's where you stop and it becomes a work package because it's work to be completed by the team or by people on your project team. So that's when you stop. The other thing that's important to understand is the 100% rule, which is a WBS contains 100% of the work to be done. So all of the work, all of the deliverables to be created should be contained in the work breakdown structure. So key idea, create a work breakdown structure that organizes the deliverables of the project into a hierarchy. So some key terminology from this chapter, you can see it in the key terminology section in chapter 4, the references to the images, and thanks for watching this video.